on one end, I'm super impressed by the capabilities of LLMs and the ability to recognize spoken languages. But on the other hand, at the same time, what seems so basic is still month, maybe a year or 2 years away when everything else seems so sophisticated. Welcome to Culture and Code, a podcast about the biggest shifts in culture and tech. I'm Rei Inamoto, a creative entrepreneur and founding partner of Ironco, a global innovation firm based in New York, Tokyo, and Singapore.
And I'm Tara Tan, managing partner of Strange Ventures, an investment firm focused on the future of computing.
So Tara, how's your weekend? Long weekend?
Good. We went to Big Sur. That was really nice. Yeah, we did. Have you been?
I have been. I used to live on the West Coast in San Francisco. So
Yeah.
Big definitely brings back good memories.
Yeah, it was magical. We brought our kids, our
Yeah.
3-year-old and 4-year-old, and they had a blast. It was like the
Oh, wow.
river, the ocean. Yeah, it was amazing.
So is the Labor Day weekend considered the last weekend of summer in California?
I guess so. I feel like it. Or I feel like we, because the weather is so cold in the summer in San
Yeah.
Francisco, it really gets warm
Ironically.
around September, early October. So it
Yeah.
feels like we're entering summer now, but school's in season. But that's the surprising thing about living in such a temperate place. It's
Yeah.
like the weather's kind of consistent all the time, so we don't really have seasons.
I
So it
know.
feels like we're constantly in flow. I don't know.
I
kinda like it.
lived in San Francisco for 5 years, and I kept waiting for summer to arrive. And I
See when
waited
it's
5
there.
years, and it never came. So I moved back to New York.
There's like 2 weeks of like hot summer.
Yes. Yeah.
And
Indian summer,
usually
like in
I'm like,
October, right?
yeah, and usually by then I'm, that's enough for me.
Oh, yeah. No, but I did appreciate the lack of humidity on the West Coast.
New York
Yeah.
summers are brutal. If you don't have AC, it's brutal.
Yeah, but I mean, I was in Japan this summer, and
Yeah.
that was way more brutal than New
Really?
York. So,
Oh my goodness.
I mean, New York felt like a breeze, quite literally a breeze.
Wow.
So, yes. So the Labor Day weekend is over. My kids are not quite, well, one of them is back in school. The other one is still at home. So a couple more days, and he'll be back in school. So the summer is over. So the first episode of the fall, and this is going to be our third episode, the topic that we're going to talk about is intelligence as OS. And this is based on your newsletter that you wrote maybe about a week or so ago when Pixel announced an upgrade, particularly with Gemini and other AI features. So why don't you start by talking about what was announced a week or so ago, and then we'll dive into this idea of intelligence as OS.
Yeah, fun story. So, to start, I'm actually going to take a detour, if that's okay.
Okay. Yeah, no, dude.
So one of the worst predictions in business history came in the 1980s.
Okay.
When AT&T paid McKinsey probably millions of dollars to figure out how big the mobile market was. So they went off, they did their thing.
This is 1980.
Yeah, around the 1980s, around there.
It is, okay. Yeah.
So they went out, did the whole, consulting thing, came back and told AT&T readers, it's not worth pursuing. It's not a strategy worth pursuing.
Okay.
Mobile is going to be capped at maximum 900,000 subscribers globally.
900,000, okay.
Don't waste your time. The phones were clunky. It's too heavy. No one's going to use it. People don't like walking around with their phones. Don't do it. So one of the, sort of probably worst business predictions in history came from them in that era. It probably cost AT&T $12 billion to get over that.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
How long, do you happen to know how long it took for AT&T to realize that
I think
it was
about 5 years. Yeah. So I don't know exactly. About 5 years after that disastrous report, they realized that they were totally wrong. So they ended up going on a buying spree and buying other little startups that started going after the strategy of, sprouting up cellular networks, basically for mobile. So it took them about 5 years before they realized, they were disastrously wrong, and so went after the other strategy. But I wanted to say that because, predictions are interesting because they can go absolutely right or absolutely wrong, and absolutely wrong can actually be very costly. Very costly.
Right. Billions of dollars in this case. But it sounds like AT&T has caught up and has been able to gain enough market share to be at least one of the leading mobile network providers in the US.
Yeah. But they shouldn't have had any competition at the start.
Yeah.
We're biggest by far. But yes,
Yeah.
anyway, it's a fun story about chasing down wrong, sort of the wrong path or wrong streets or wrong road.
Yeah.
And the takeaway I did when I was researching this piece is, it's easy to get it wrong, right? It's easy to get it wrong. And the thing with data is that it is a past pattern predictor and not the future. It predicts the past well, but not the future.
Yeah.
I went back when I was studying this piece and I saw that Google released its new, sort of pixel update recently, and it had, these Magic Queue, which is its flagship AI feature. And so they started embedding Gemini into their phones and kind of highlighting these features where it would like pluck out data or contextual data from across your apps. So say if you were on a text message with a friend and talking about, oh, hey, what were we talking about dinner this weekend? It could pull in that email. You could start setting a calendar invite and all of that. So that was really interesting. And then, you could do fun stuff like do live translation over the phone. So if you were talking to a friend in Japan, it would do a live translation there. So we should do the next call in Japanese and English. That'll be fun.
And see if we work. I can speak in Japanese, and if you can decipher what the heck I'm talking about.
That's right. That'd be super cool. But that made me realize that what was interesting and emerging from this piece was that, this sort of Gemini layer was actually creating the interface and the experience and what I call the OS, where it matters less about what's under the hood, but what the sort of AI layer can sort of surface to the front. And so I made a prediction where I was like, okay, look, if, I think Apple has by far the largest hardware market share for phones. But what if, people, but a lot of Apple users use Google products. So like Gmail, Google Calendar, Google Maps, and so on. And so, it made me realize that if the future of UI or digital experience is on the intelligence layer, wouldn't places like Apple start using that? Using Gemini to basically orchestrate the layer below. And shortly after I published this piece, like a few hours later, it broke that Apple is exploring to use Gemini to power Siri. And a couple of days later, after that, I think Meta as well. It's not
Meta is using Gemini.
Well, they're exploring. Nothing's confirmed.
Oh,
but
okay.
Exploring using Gemini to basically cut across their different apps and tools, basically as that unifying interface or OS, which is super interesting. But it made me realize that the future of the interface is really intelligent.
So let's double click into that a bit more. When you say intelligence, that's a pretty big word and pretty broad term. What do you mean by it exactly?
Yeah, I do really just mean like the AI layer. So right now it's more of an LLM, like could become, more reasoning based. An LLM that basically orchestrates or sits across sort of the different apps.
Right. Different apps.
Yes.
Yeah.
So what's interesting is that the intelligence or the AI layer is able to decipher the user's intention and then surface the information that's relevant to them.
Right. Yeah, because what's on, say, just to talk about iPhone or the iOS, that intelligence is not very intelligent as of this moment. Yeah. Whether it's Siri and its voice recognition, or I'm flabbergasted that, so for instance, like every time I walk into my office, I have a digital key that I'm supposed to tap to unlock the key to walk in.
Yeah.
And it knows I'm at the building.
Yeah.
My phone knows I'm at the building. And roughly speaking, I walk in within the 15 to 30-minute window on a weekday to walk through the locked door of my office. And every time I have to still open the key app to get into the office, tap the key and then unlock and walk in. And I'm just like begging the iOS to know, hey, at least surface the app so that when I'm at that location, there's a pretty high possibility that I'm about to enter the office. And what seems so, and I'm just pointing out a very tactical, small example that may be very difficult for a big company like Apple with billions of users to know, hey, out of billion users, what percentage of those people might have that use case? That might be very minute, but what seems like a very simple thing for a human to do, to just unlock a door, seems still so difficult for a machine, a piece of software to do. Is just, on one end, I'm super impressed by the capabilities of LLMs and the ability to recognize spoken languages. But on the other hand, at the same time, what seems so basic is still month, maybe a year or 2 years away, when everything else seems so sophisticated. And yeah, to your point, that intelligence across multiple apps and multiple use cases, if there was that intelligence layer, that would make at least that friction less painful.
Yeah. I mean, technically, it's not hard to do. You can do it, right? I mean, whoever that maker is can make it happen. It's just, not a priority. But, kind of going up one level to the broader point, which is like, Apple's entire use of iOS App Store ecosystem assumes that we will always want more apps, right? There's always going to be more apps for different niches. I mean, how many apps do you have on your phone right now?
Oh, dozens and dozens.
Yeah, dozens, maybe even hundreds over the last, 10 years. I think I got my first phone, probably the iPhone 4, I want to say. I'm now on like 15 or 16, so it's like 10 generations of a phone. I probably downloaded maybe 1,000 apps more, right? I mean, the entire premise is built on top of this ecosystem.
Yeah.
But what happens when intelligence becomes the OS and you don't need the App Store anymore?
Right.
Right? And it's like, that becomes really interesting. And so in my piece, I started looking at, funnily enough, when BlackBerry and Apple were going head to head at the same time.
So this is what, like 2005-ish?
Something around there. Yeah. Like BlackBerry was it two? Yeah. What was that? I go look at that piece, but it was like BlackBerry watched Steve Jobs unveil the phone. At that time, they had, I want to say 20% or close to 20% market share.
Right.
Of the sort of US smartphone market share. So, do you remember that time where everyone was on their little BlackBerry and like typing away?
So you say in that BlackBerry fell from 56% of the US smartphone market in 2019 to 1% in 2024.
That's right. And basically,
maybe this is not, you say 2019, but maybe this is 2009.
Oh yeah, it might be. Sorry, it might be.
Or 2019.
2009. Yeah, 2009. It's got to be 2009 to 2014. Sorry. Yes, my bad.
Yeah.
We got as a typo there. But yeah, I do think that, so that was an interesting point. There's a typo there. So it's like 2009 to 2014, basically in that 5 years day. I mean, they basically lost not just market lead, but they were almost completely out of the game. And the reason for that was they were chasing after the wrong strategy. So they had such a loyal following. I remember my friends, who were just obsessed with their BlackBerry. They were constantly using it. They, they
were called crackberries.
The crackberries, right? Exactly.
Crackberries.
So BlackBerry was so obsessed with this vision, and they did everything right. They listened to their users. They heard them that they liked secure email. They liked the tactile keyboard. And so when iPhone came out, they were like, this is a toy. No one's going to use this. This is just for fun. The most popular iPhone app at that time was a beer drinking app. You tipped it in the beer drink.
Oh man!
Well, they were like, "This is a toy."
I do remember that app. I do remember that. Yeah. Yes.
And within 2 years, or within the first 2 years, they looked like they were right, because iPhone, BlackBerry sales actually doubled in the 2 years because they had such a foothold on the enterprise after the iPhone came out. But after 2 years, very quickly, it tanked, because very quickly consumers realized that they loved this touchscreen app ecosystem moment. And that completely annihilated the demand for BlackBerries. So my question here is, are we in another turning point where, if Apple or other players are pursuing this idea of an app store,
Mm-hmm.
What happens if that's not what users want anymore? What if you don't want to
Yeah.
download a million apps all the time?
It's very possible because like having to think in terms of apps or before apps on phones, they were applications on desktops. And you needed to switch from this app to another app, and you had to think about like the compatibility of files and platforms. So you had to shift your way of thinking from like if you were on a desktop, yeah, you have pens and paper, what have you, but you're still sort of working in one environment and you don't really have to think about the context changing. Whereas when you're in the digital space, whether it's desktop or mobile space, you're having to switch context all the time. So a feature like Magic Queue, which is the new, this is the gist of your newsletter a week or so ago. It's the new intelligence layer that eliminates the user to be continually switching context from one app to the next. And instead, I, as a user, can just focus on a particular task or particular goal that I'm trying to accomplish. And then what apps that I have to use to get that goal accomplished could become invisible.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It could be. I mean, it is a prediction. Who knows where the future is headed? But, I think it is always worth questioning. What is status quo? Is this still going to be the future? Right. So I think
Yeah.
there's an assumption here that whatever OS that we're using now, whatever that, sort of medium that we're looking at
Hmm.
today is going to be
Hmm.
status quo. And my guess is that it may not very quickly.
Yeah. Just to counter argue that,
Mhm.
I wonder too whether, so for instance, like Apple was and maybe still is, Google is still paying billions of dollars to Apple to be the default search engine on Apple devices, like particularly in
Sure.
Safari,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. So they are buying their way into the Apple ecosystem. And, yeah, people might be using Safari instead of Chrome. And then within Safari, the search capability is coming from Google. So Google is somewhat invisible. But in this case, they could potentially buy their way into being the topmost layer so that even though what the device that the user is using is an Apple device, the layer, the first thing that they encounter instead of Siri might be a Google Gemini or Magic Queue feature. Yeah. I wonder if the user would care or not, to be honest. Yeah. For
Yeah.
them, it might not be a deal breaker or differentiator.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like for Apple, they've always demonstrated that the LLM is a plugin. So whether it's OpenAI or Gemini, I think or even Anthropic, it
Mm.
feels like, for them, it's kind of a plug and play moment. I think what will be interesting is how Apple preserves the experience or the user
Mm.
experience.
Mm-hmm.
If they're shifting between the different models or integrating between them or something, or how would they preserve this experience, right, of using a phone and still making this the best experience there is
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
consistent experience there is. So that's the
Yeah.
question there.
Did this news make so you use an iPhone, you said? iPhone
Right
15 or
now,
what?
so, yeah.
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 Yeah. But did this news make you want to switch potentially to?
I consider it. I don't think it's mature enough yet. I still do enjoy the experience of the iPhone right now, the interface
Yeah.
and all the little
Yeah.
micro interactions. I am starting to feel, and I think Android users, especially if you talk to them, they're quite active champions right now where the phone is better. And now if the AI capabilities are better, then they're going to have more talking points there. But I know the camera is a big sticking point already on Android versus Apple, interestingly enough. Because Apple used to
Yeah.
have the best camera. Like
But
no
now it's
no
not that they can't quite claim that, right?
And even, and it's pretty clear. Like my friends and family who use Android, they're like, oh yeah, the Android camera is way better. And they have like baked in AI features already, way before Apple had it.
Yeah, and even I think in the same announcement, didn't they make the camera feature so that you can zoom like 100 times?
Yeah,
And
something
it
crazy like that.
uses generative AI to fill in the gap of
Right.
pixels so
Yeah.
that when you zoom in, it becomes crisp, even though the photo itself didn't necessarily capture the details, but it's
Right.
guessing and it makes it look crisp when you zoom in 100
That's right.
times.
That's right.
Yeah. So things like that. But I guess, and this becomes slightly a branding question, but I think one of the small but effective thing that Apple has done is the blue bubble.
Yeah. Yeah.
Blue bubble versus the
Yeah.
green bubble.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like because I work in the mobile network space for many years, and I used to switch between phones just to make sure that I was getting a fair view of each side of the aisle, so to
Sure.
speak. The red pill versus the blue pill.
Yeah.
And I would, like, every 2 years or so, I would on purpose switch between the iOS platform and a
Right.
certain career, and then Android or Samsung platform,
That's right.
and see what the experience was like. And I did that at least I've gone back and forth at least twice, and both times. And no offense to who work with Samsung or Google, whoever, but the experience was so painful for me.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
having grown up in the Apple ecosystem for such a long
Yeah.
time,
Yeah.
that it's not the Google experience that was painful, but it was just the overall the combination of a device, a piece of hardware that was manufactured by somebody else,
Mhm.
and then the software layer was provided by Google and other software OEMs. And just the lack of integration or the lack of synergy between the hardware and software was just so painfully frustrating that after maybe 3 months, I was about to pull my hair out. But I would stick with it for at least a year, at least like almost 18 months just to stick with it. But every time I had to go back to the iOS, and I did that again and the same thing. So I'm I want to be hopeful that the potential switch could bring me the bliss that I had been looking for. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But what would you say that would tip you over the edge
I
and
mean,
go to the green side
yeah,
versus the
I
blue
mean,
side?
for me, I think it's experience first, right? So, I mean, I think any brand or company that's looking in the age of AI, and this is something I champion all the time, is that, UX or developer experience, product experience is so important. I think it's the make or break,
Mm,
honestly, for me.
yeah.
And Apple, has done a great job of it over the last decade. The question is, can it bring this over to the next, sort of the intelligence age and
Yeah.
reinvent itself enough to make the experience top tier? Because Siri for me has not been
You mean
top tier.
Apple or Google?
Apple, yeah. Can it bring it?
Apple.
Can it reinvent itself to bring the iOS experience to the intelligence age? Is still yet to be seen. Like Siri was
Yeah.
not a great experience for me. Still has not a great experience for me.
Oh, it's horrible. It's
I actually have to
painful.
turn it off actively because it
Yes,
bothers me
agreed.
every time it comes on. And so
Yes.
that for me is like a crack in the armor. Whereas, it used to be that every interaction was so thought out and deliberated on the iPhone that it feels like magic. And, I think right now we haven't been seeing that, but, we'll remain to see if that changes over time. But I would say experience is going to be the major way that any company today can leapfrog.
Mm,
So like I'm not saying that this is Apple's doomsday moment, not at all. If they can, sort of leverage what they have and leapfrog, I think that's great. But it is definitely an opportunity for Google or Android or anything of these companies to leapfrog
I mean,
if they truly get the experience right.
yeah, I would say the best case scenario for a company like Apple is
Yeah.
that Apple itself cracks the AI code and is able to produce their own AI platform that they can control, Apple can control, and Apple can manage. That I think would be the best case scenario. I would say a second best not so bad scenario for Apple and particularly the user is that whether it's Google plus Gemini or OpenAI plus ChatGPT,
Yeah.
the what you call the intelligence layer, if it's invisible enough, it might not matter to the user whether it was powered by Gemini or OpenAI or whatever LLM that is superior to everything else that delivers on the promise of, you just talking to a phone and the phone getting it, for you. And if Apple is the hardware delivery channel for those experiences, and if that portion of the experience is invisible to the user and is seamless, whether it's delivered by Apple or Google or OpenAI, I would say that it doesn't matter to the user. And like Gmail versus Apple Mail or Google Doc versus Pages. I mean, I use Apple pretty religiously, but I still use Google Doc over Pages just because it works so much better across different devices. And whether I'm on an Apple device or not, it still works. So that's what matters to me as opposed to, is this an Apple product or not? So I do think that, and I'm getting a vibe, at least from what I read on the internet, that I kind of wonder if Apple gave up on AI.
I don't think so. I mean, there are a lot
You
of
don't think
smart.
so?
I don't think so. I think there are a lot of smart people in there
Yeah,
through it.
no doubt. No
No
doubt.
doubt. No, I don't think
Yeah.
they've given up, clearly. They have,
Yeah.
a really strong distribution system. They have
Yes.
really smart people working in there. I think their strategy is still a little bit unclear. And, they've not really always been the first to market. They're a slower drumbeat. So I wouldn't say the game is over, but I would say that it is heating up competition-wise. I don't think they've given up. I think it's too early in the game to say. That's my sense. But,
I don't know if I disagree with you. I want to believe that's true, but I'm not quite convinced that, just because like they've had Siri for such a long time. And I mean, to your point, it still doesn't work. It's such a bad product. And that's probably one of the most basic AI functions that a company like Apple should get right. But after so many years, for whatever reason, whether they're not investing enough in it, or, I mean, I get newsletters with the word AI in it, and Siri still pronounces AI as I.
yeah.
Like when I'm read a subject headline from a newsletter or email that I get that has the word AI in it, Siri pronounces it, so and so, I, whatever. And it just beats me that in 2025, a company like Apple, I mean, somebody at Apple must notice those things. I don't know, but it just seems so. Maybe it's easy for me to say outside of being the fence, yeah. But it doesn't seem like that is their priority for the time being. It
Yeah.
must be, yeah, yeah. All right. So just to wrap up, where do you want to leave this conversation with?
I mean, I kind of, champion it. I think this is a time of extreme transformation. And I think there's a lot of reinvention that's going on across.
Mm.
So the companies that can sort of leapfrog its competitors, I think this is a perfect time to do it. That's my real takeaway from this. And don't go, barking after the wrong trees if you can. Or if you can, just
Yeah.
course correct as quickly as possible. Like don't be an AT&T in the 80s.
Don't be an AT&T and in the 80s and in 2025. What was the mobile space back in the 80s that AT&T and McKinsey got so wrong? I mean, today everybody's saying, AI is it, AI is it. But do you think there's anything else that we may be saying that, oh, you know what, this is not an opportunity, and then 5 years, 10 years from now, that it becomes a massive opportunity?
I
Do
think
you see anything like
I
that?
think it's constant. I mean, my entire job is
Yeah.
tracking these inventions, right? So
Yeah.
like as an investor, right? That's my day job. There are many. There's a lot of things going on.
Name one. Name one. What other like
Energy.
AI is such a big space, but yeah.
Energy is a big one. So I think I wrote about this as well, where it was like, AI's main bottleneck, at least in the US, it's not about data centers, it's about power. It's actually about energy. We're actually running out of energy. The US's energy grid was built for homes, not for industrials. And because we haven't caught up really in the last 30, 40 years, like, manufacturing and industrial work has actually left the US, right? And we transitioned to a service economy. What happened was that our industrial infrastructure totally lapsed.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so right now, to power all these like mega data centers, we don't have the energy grid to make it happen. So there are two things. Either we build real fast or we create new sources of energy, which includes like nuclear, which includes other ways of doing it. But that's actually quite a big sticking point that I don't think people are really talking about. But we'll say that for another podcast. But yeah, it's massive. Like the America's energy grid was built for homes, maybe offices, right? Homes and offices, like white collar work, not industrials. So we're kind of approaching a chokehold right now, especially like on the East Coast, I would say around the Virginia area. There's a ton of new data centers that's sprouting up. They're requiring energy that was traditionally used to power like a town or a home, like a suburb, not like industrial centers. So I think that's going to be a bottleneck.
So I just happened, we could have a completely different conversation, a different episode on this alone. But one industry that is seeing a massive shift in terms of their need is architecture. So up until 2010, maybe 20, architecture for business, like corporations, was on the upswing. But in the last like 7 to 10 years, it started to deteriorate. And COVID definitely decreased the need for corporate offices to exist to some extent, right? And in exchange, the need for data centers and the need to design and build data center architecture is just on a hockey stick swing. Yeah. So that's a slightly different topic. Well, that's, I guess, a very different topic that we can decide to focus on in the next couple of weeks.
All right. What's your takeaway from this conversation?
I think that the next interface is invisible. Yeah. There's been a lot of focus on user interface, user experience, and using tools like ChatGPT and the voice feature, and just the fact that you can have a conversation with it to get things done or do certain things. It's not quite there as much as it's being talked about. Like in real world scenarios, I'm yet to still rely on visual interfaces to get things done. But I don't think it's as far as we thought a couple of years ago. And, your point about intelligence as OS, what enables that intelligence as OS is visual and audio perception that makes it possible. It's shifting from touch to audio very quickly. It's not quite there yet, but I think it will be there much sooner than we think. And it will, speaking of prediction, at the end of 2024, I made a prediction that smart glasses like the Ray-Ban Meta product will finally start to see mass adoption by the end of 2025, I think I said. And a couple months after I made the prediction, and I said that Apple would enter the space. And it's at this point, it's still a rumor that Apple is creating like a lower tier version of Vision Pro. But maybe in the next, 6 to 12 months or so, that's probably the next product that Apple could make. Yeah. But anyway, interface becoming invisible in the next 12 to 24 months, I think is a reality.
Yeah, I think the transition will happen quickly than we think. For intelligence as OS, I think would probably happen within the next 3 to 5 years.
Yeah.
So very quick. Well, but think of the corresponding industries, right? Mobile app developers, any of that ecosystem, I think is going to change very drastically. Advertising is going to change drastically.
Yeah, and I will believe it when I see a green bubble from you.
Or maybe there will not be any more of that concept. Who knows?
That's true. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see.
All right. That's
Thanks,
a good
Rick.
place to end. All right. Yeah.
Take care. Bye.